I was raised in Bermondsey, southeast London, which was a notoriously racist area at the time. The school that I went to, I felt was representative of the community that we were living in. And so from very early on, I experienced and knew very well what racism was. No one gave me any context. I just assumed it happened somewhere A406, A13, one of the big motorways. And I remember driving past that scene and in my head thinking, damn, that's a terrible accident. I hope whoever's in that accident survived. I started moving slowly away from the music and became a lot more invested in my actual career as an educator. So then when it got to December and I was like, this is not working for me. I'm a bit bored, basically. I feel unfulfilled. So I knew I wasn't going to work in the mainstream primary school as a teacher.
You know what? Yeah, I know it's not. I know it seems like I keep on doing this, but my guest today, I'm going to start off with a disclaimer. He's an Arsenal fan, and the reason why I'm starting with that, it seems to be a coincidence that a lot of people keep on bringing on are Arsenal fans, but it literally is just something I discovered. But outside from that, actually, the reason why I really want to talk to him today because he is the assistant head of a primary school, Eastbourne Community School. And it's such a rarity to not only find men, but black men in particular, who are in like school and education, like something I never had kind of growing up. And the first time I had a conversation, I was like, right, man, like love what you do and love your approach. Because outside of that, like he's a Senko, so for those who don't know what that is, special education needs coordinator. He has taught in various schools in the last like decade and stuff. He's also the director of the amazing Reach Out project we're going to delve into. But I have Emmanuel Awoyelu.
Yeah, you got
I
it.
said that correctly?
Second time.
Second time. I'm getting tongue-tied. I'm like, come on, man. I should know the name. Like, it's a Nigerian name. Like, come on. But that's who I've got in the building today.
With the accent as well. Yeah, no, thank you, man. I appreciate that. I love the best part of that intro is me being an Arsenal fan. Winning energy. You need that on here, man. You need that winning energy, man.
Listen. Right about now, we're loving it. So let's ride with it.
Listen, I'm going to milk it as long as I can, man. But no, thank you for having me today, man. It's a pleasure.
Well, it's like, honestly, when I was delving a bit more into your story, I think what really fascinated by was when I look at your younger years and your relationship with school and what you do right now. I was like, how did you go from where you were being expelled, excluded from school to actually working in schools? I was so curious and fascinated by that. But before I ever went there, I was even more curious. Like, what was it like for you, like a younger you, coming up in the UK in the education system, navigating?
So for me, navigating the education system as a youth was difficult. So my parents came to the UK in the 1980s, and for them, both for different reasons, didn't receive formal education. So I think one of the first things I heard from my parents consistently was the importance of education and the reason why I needed to go to school and get an education, full stop. I was raised in Bermondsey, southeast London, which was a notoriously racist area at the time. And my experience of education, it coincides with my experience of being raised in southeast London, Bermondsey, in a racist area, because the school that I went to, I felt was representative of the community that we were living in. And so from very early on, probably far younger than it should be for a young child, I experienced and knew very well what racism was. I felt it secondhand from my parents and their personal interaction with teachers and with head teachers. And for me, I think maybe even as early as 7, 8, when I was in like year 4, I kind of already made up my mind that education wasn't the place for me as a student, as a child. And so my back was against the wall in that sense. Certain members of staff couldn't talk to me because I could see that they didn't have a level of respect for me. They weren't kind to me. I knew how they would speak about my parents, and I would know how my parents would also speak about them, because I'll be listening to conversations with my parents and seeing how they're angry about the way the school are dealing with them and talking to them as kind of like second-class citizens. So my first experience of education being a primary school student wasn't a positive one, and it ended really abruptly and quite negatively when I got excluded in year 5. And so that exclusion, I think, for my family was quite significant because I'm the eldest of 3. Up until that point, I think they could appreciate that there were other factors that led to my exclusion. I was a cheeky, mischievous child. But I think as an educator now, I can appreciate also that if you don't engage a child in their education, they're more likely to also be mischievous and get into trouble. I also don't think they catered to the needs of all of the children. So it wasn't very inclusive anyway. So yeah, I got excluded in year five. My parents made a very difficult decision to move me to East London. Not sure if they thought it was necessarily going to be better, but they moved me to East London. I started a new primary school in year six, in East London in Newham. And that for me was probably the best year of primary for sure, and one of the best years of my educational experience. I had a very warm teacher, very kind. I don't know if you remember Ali G from back in the day, I'm sure you do. So Ali G being like so iconic for us as a primary child. I remember our teacher used to read the register, and everybody in the class would respond with "I," and like, it was just little things like that, kind of just the creativity, the warmth. It was just free. It was very loose. I don't know if the type and the nature of school had a part to play in it because my previous school was a Roman Catholic school, like I said, in the heart of Bermondsey, a notoriously racist area. This primary school was in East Ham, one of the most diverse boroughs in the whole of the country, just a typical state comprehensive school. Um, and so my experience was pretty good there. And then fast forward to secondary, I then moved to a secondary school in East London, in East Ham, and I experienced my second school exclusion in year 10. And leading up to that, I guess there was kind of a pattern in that my parents would come to parents' evening, my dad in particular, and after every parents' evening, it would be the same message. And that message was Emmanuel, crazy potential, but he's not fulfilling it. He's not engaged, or there's this issue, or he's always kind of involved in something else. By the time I got to year 10, that was the message I had in my head. Like, yeah, I've got a lot of potential, but I myself could not tell you why I wasn't doing particularly well. I was almost coasting through secondary school. And it got to year 10, and then I had a very significant experience. I got excluded after being in a classroom with 30 other children. I was doing my science lesson, and me and my best friend at the time, we were probably talking or messing about. Something happened, and the class teacher asked us to leave. So we left, and as we were walking down the corridor, we realized that we needed our coursework because the type of science, the GCSE science that we were doing was applied science, where our coursework for the 2 years is what would go towards our final grade. There was no exams. So we walked back to get our coursework, knowing that even if we were going to get kicked out, we needed to have our coursework done, ready. So we walked back. The teacher wasn't prepared for us to come in. We made an attempt to go and get our coursework, and then she tried to basically hold our work. And then a little, don't even know if the word's not a scuffle, but basically there's a tugging on coursework between myself and the teacher and my friend and the teacher. All the coursework falls on the floor. We attempt to pick up our coursework, we get it, and then we walk out. And a couple of minutes later, it felt like an episode from The Bill. We had, people running down the corridor saying, "Hey, come back, come back." And long story short, they were accusing us of assaulting the teacher. We said there's 30 other children in the classroom, go and ask them. We did no such thing. Other members of staff saying, no, we heard it from next door. They did this, they did that. So yeah, our parents were called in, quite abruptly. They made a decision and decided to exclude us from school. So that was that. And then when it came to reviewing that decision after a period of time, I wouldn't say it was reversed, but they took a different approach and they put us into an internal exclusion, which meant that we were in school, we were on the premises, but we weren't able to go to every single class that we were taking. Only our core subjects, and our core subjects would be taken in a room led by an academic mentor. And so we spent most of our final year and a half, I would say, in internal exclusion. And that had a massive effect on my educational experience because I left school consequently with only 40 to see GCSEs. And the ripple effect of that was that I could not go on to then go and do my A levels straight away. I was a year behind my peers. Yeah, so that was difficult because obviously my first year of college, all my friends are now doing the A levels and I'm retaking my maths GCSE. I'm doing BTEC media. I'm doing a diploma here and there to fill up the time. So I completed my maths GCSE that year, 2017, I believe, July. I completed it. And then that summer, as we were getting ready to start college and my first year of A level, a week or two later in September, on the 25th of August, my best friend, whom I was excluded with, him and two other of my good friends from school, they tragically passed away in a car accident. And two survivors who were also my friends, the brothers, they survived the accident, but one of them, I guess you could say up until today, was still or is still recovering and still learning how to walk and talk effectively. And so that happened when I was 17. And then what happened then was me basically, the first part of my A levels was really disrupted because I kind of I went into essentially depression, not diagnosed, but I know I was in depression. I stopped attending my classes, having anger outbursts within the college. I've even got a certificate that says the only child that smashed the window, and found a way to get away with it. I think that was handed to me in the second part of my A levels. So
Did you talk to anyone about it?
so no, I didn't. Not officially, not formally. My college didn't have anything specific in place, like a counselor or whatever. I did have an English teacher that I was fond of, who, funny enough, her children just so happened to go to my school. So she was aware, she was there for me. It wasn't structured, but I knew I could kind of confide in her if I needed to. I guess the people that I really sought comfort and support and help from were my peers, my friends. It was only a year after we had left school. So you can imagine that was the one incident that actually brought many of us back together again. And at the spot where we lost our three friends, we spent the next 3, 4, 5 weeks every night straight together at the place where they had passed away. And as toxic as some moments were, it was for us who probably you could describe a young group of boys from East London, different dynamics with families and stuff like that. That for us was probably the best thing we could have, which is each other. And because of that experience, we were able to suffer together, grieve together. And I could honestly say, actually, if it wasn't for what took place that summer night, I don't think many of us would have stayed or remained friends or have the level of friendship that we have today, if not for the bonding that took place then. Does that make sense? Because we all have that one thing that just holds us and keeps us together. We had cousins of our friends who we knew loosely, now some of our closest friends, because as a result of just all of us coming together for our friends, just more relationships were created and developed as a result of that. And that's the one thing that actually brought us together. So although their death was incredibly tragic, I guess like everything in life, there was some type of beauty or life that came out from it as a result. So yeah, so that was my educational experience and all that came with it, and it was very difficult to navigate for different reasons. Institutionally, it was difficult, but then life also happened, and nobody could have predicted what would have happened on that night. Ironically, I was supposed to be with them on that night, and if not for my mum being the Nigerian mother that she is and said, "You will absolutely not leave this house tonight," and me soaking in my room and not being able to go out with my friends who were out that night, I could have easily have been in that vehicle with them. We all lived on the same road, like we were together all the time. I just couldn't go out that night for whatever reason. So
Do you look back on that night now with the fact that you didn't go out and how life has looked very different for you? Like, how do you look back on that night? I'm curious.
do you know what's funny? Yeah, I've never really kind of looked at it explicitly and thought, oh my gosh, like imagine if I went out. I say it when I'm talking about it loosely, and I just say it. But I think the reason why is because although actually it's a real like, oh, but actually you could have been 80% of my friends were out that night. They just so happened to all be in the same car all together and left the venue that we were meant to be just to go McDonald's somewhere just literally 5 minutes away. And then the accident happened within, a couple of minutes of where we live. So it could have easily have been me, could have easily have been any one of my other friends that would have hopped in. The reason why I don't think about it in a very dramatic way is I think before that and after that, there's been many other close death, near death experiences that I think I hold a bit more sentiment towards, or I think of in a way where it's like, no, that's a night where God helped me, or my mum's prayers saved me, or God was looking out for me, because something about those experiences are far more traumatic than me thinking about that night when I lost my friends, me not going in the car with them. I don't know what it is, but it doesn't really play on my mind that much. It's a reality that if my mum didn't keep me at home, who knows what could have happened. Could have been a survivor, could have been in the car, may not have been in the car, could have witnessed it. All of those things could have happened. But what's interesting about that night that I will say that I always do reflect on is I remember going to sleep that night, and I remember roughly from about midnight till early morning, I couldn't sleep. Like something within my spirit, and I wasn't spiritual. My mum was a born again Christian. I at that point don't necessarily think I was a practicing Christian or whatever. So I didn't even know that it was a spiritual thing per se. But I remember feeling uneasy, um, but with no understanding or explanation. I couldn't tell you why. I just could not sleep. It was just insomnia as far as I was aware. And I remember, and I always remember in the distance, because my window was open a little bit, hearing sirens in the background. And although I could not link it to anything, I had no context, no nothing. It's like the reason why I remembered that is because it felt like the sirens were very significant at that moment in time. And I didn't sleep the whole night. And then about 6:37 in the morning, I get a call from one of my friends, and he's like, "Have you heard?" And I'm like, "Have I heard what?" And he's saying, "Yeah, there was an accident. There was an accident that's happened like this morning, like at some point this morning, and they're saying that three of them have died, and one of them is Jess. No, they said no. I think he said one of them is Idris. One of them, I think he said one of them is Idris. One of them is Raymond, but we don't know who the other one is. But they're saying three of them. And I remember just like dropping the phone and sobbing, and then having another friend that calls me after and is saying, "Yo, Manny," and it's like that second call for the confirmation. Yeah. So I remember that night for different reasons because I remember not being able to sleep. I remember how I felt when I received that call. I remember running to my friend's house who had reportedly died, but we wasn't sure because it was meant to be one person in the hospital that we knew was there, but we weren't sure who it was and whether that person had passed or not. I remember running with like my bare feet or socks on to my boy's house who lived just around the corner to be greeted by his younger sister. When I opened the door, sorry, when she opened the door, I could just tell by her face something was wrong. I knew at that point, you know. I said to her, "Where's Jess? Where's your mum?" And she just said with the straightest of face, no emotion. It's like she didn't really understand what she was saying. She said, "Mummy and Daddy have gone to the hospital. Jess is not here. Like Jess is dead." And she even went as far to tell me that that he went blind before he passed away. You know, so and this girl, she's in my younger brother's age. She was probably year six at the time because she's in the same year as my brother, and she just said it like just said it. No emotion, no real realization of what she was saying, I don't think. And yeah, and I broke down again. And then shortly after, my parents rolled up in the car and told me to get in. And they said, "What hospital?" I said, "Whitechapel." That's what my friends are telling me. So my mum had some stuff for me in the car. We drove straight to Whitechapel Hospital. And I'll never forget this part either. What was crazy is as we were driving to the hospital, not far from where we live, a few minutes down the road, there was a section of the main road that was blocked off. And I remember seeing a double decker bus, completely the front of it written off. I saw a car that looked like chewed up in the middle of the road. And I didn't know that's where they passed because when I heard that at least two of my friends had passed away and there was one potentially that was dead. When I'd heard all of this and it was a car accident, I just assumed the motorway. You know, no one gave me any context. No one. I just assumed it happened somewhere A46, A13, one of the big motorways. And I remember driving past that scene and in my head thinking, "Damn, like that's a terrible accident. I hope whoever's in that accident survived." And it turned out that that was actually the same accident in which they had passed away. So we were driving to Whitechapel Hospital. We drove there. My parents dropped me off. I quickly ran inside, and you know, I had a number of my boys that were already in the hospital. One of my close boys, he ran up to me and just gave me a hug. He was weeping. I knew that whoever it was that was in there definitely wasn't alive anymore. And the reaction of my friends, who for the 6, 7 years I'd known many of them, never seen them cry, never seen them like that. I knew it was bad. So yeah, they confirmed what he came up to me, said it's Jess like is gone, bro. We walked. Well, I walked, I think, with one of my friends along the corridor to where he was in the room. As I was walking, I'm walking past one or two family members, his cousin that I went to school with, and I walked into the room, and he was there, you know, laying there. His mum and his dad were beside him. And yeah, like my best friend was just lying there on the table. So I got to see him in some ways. He had passed already at that point, but he was unrecognizable. He didn't look the same. You know, he was a handsome Congolese boy, dark skin like myself. We actually used to get confused a lot together at school. Like teachers would always get us mixed up. Quite racist in itself, actually. But yeah, teachers would always call me Jess, like, and it's like that's Jess over there, miss. And yeah, he was there, and he was. I remember saying, "That's not him. Like, it's not him. It doesn't. It's not him." You know, his face, his nose was blown up. His face had all been blown up. Yeah, and there he was laid there, you know, dead. So that was that night and the experience and everything that came with it. But that had a big part to play in not only my educational experience because of the way it impacted the next phase of education for me, but it also had a big part to play in how I decided to live my life after that. And so at a very young age, which I think 17 is still young, because I was in adoration of my friend, you know, I looked up to him. We were the same age, but I really looked up to him like a big brother. He was fierce. He was the strongest, you could say. We had racial wars, a lot of racial tension in our area at the time, and he was probably the most feared in our group, you know. And he was so highly respected that even when they had passed and we were like at the spot where they had passed away, we had a number of cars roll up to us at one point, and it was some of these boys that we had been fighting for years, you know, after school. Some of them went to our school, and they hopped out the car, and we were thinking, these ain't got no respect, but cool. Everyone's mad today. They're gonna see what mad is. And they hopped out and they came to show their respect and say, listen, you know, we know what we've been going through over the last few years, but nobody would have expected this, you know. We had respect as much as we had our issues. Like we had mad respect for him, and they came to show their respects and just say, listen, you know, it is what it is. It's squashed. And again, that was a very big moment as well, because if you know anything about Newham at the time, especially in the early 2000s, the racial tensions between the Black African Caribbean community and the Asian community within East London at the time, it was crazy. So that, in some ways, at least within East Ham, Plaistow, Stratford, the local areas, that really was the end of a lot of that racial tension, you know, because nobody would have expected it, you know. It was a big loss to the community, to the wider football community. Raymond, who passed away, was actually a professional football player, played for QPR at the
Yeah,
time.
I remember the story.
Yeah, yeah,
And when you said the
Raymond.
name, I was like, that took it back. I was like, wait a minute, he played for QPR. I remember
Yeah,
he was gonna go and do some. I remember him being in the news, and they talked about him. So
yeah,
I was like,
yeah,
wow.
yeah. He was touted for England. Yeah, so yeah, Raymond was 2 years older than us. He was in school. He was 2 years older than us. But yeah, but Jess and Idris and everyone else, bar one, we were all the same year group, and one of them was a year younger than us. And yeah, yeah. So it hit the school community, it hit the local community, it hit the football community, it hit the local football community because they were all aspiring footballers, all of them that had passed away. I think Jess and Idris, on the morning, one of them anyway, on the morning that they passed, actually got a letter through the post saying that they just got through to Fulham, Fulham trials. So yeah, so big, massive loss, and that, like I said, shaped the way I chose to then live my life, my perspective on everything. Essentially, when I saw the impacts that my boy Jess in particular, but they all had massive impacts for different reasons. But my boy Jess, because he was my closest friend at the time. When I saw how he lived his life and the impact he had on me, on my closest of friends, I said to myself, "There's definitely such thing as having an impact on people." He didn't have much achievements, maybe financially, hadn't done anything specifically, but people loved that guy. And so I said to myself, you know, I'm going to carry on that legacy, and whatever it is that I do, I leave the room, I leave my school, I leave, no matter what function I'm at, people are going to know. People are going to know me for the good reasons. You know, legacy became important to me after that death because they left such a big legacy that I just thought to myself, well, actually, that's exactly what we need to be doing as human beings. Like, when, God forbid, anything happens to me, how will people talk about me? How did I make people feel? What did I give them that they can hold on to for the rest of their life? You know, and so even at 17, he taught me so much that yeah, I use that now in every aspect of my life. So yeah, man. Like I said, even with death, life brings opportunities for growth, for new perspective, for blessings. And so, as tragic as it was, like I said, there's been many beautiful things that have come about as a result of that. So that played a big part in my educational experience and why I found it difficult to navigate.
How did that then, with that new, what I want to call looking at life differently, thinking about legacy, thinking about impact and making a difference, how did that lead you down that path of actually becoming a teacher and then rising up the ranks and doing a lot of the great work that you do right now?
Yeah, so it's interesting. Didn't real have no real action plan in regards to this incident happening. If anything, it was the opposite. Like I said, I went through depression. I wasn't taking part in my college course. I was able to kind of get my head down in the very last year of my A levels and do enough to get through in clearing to go to university. Again, I didn't really have a massive plan. I did channel a lot of my emotions at the time through music. So I had always been very creative in terms of writing and acting and that kind of thing. And so I channeled that into writing for music. I became semi-popular rapper within my local area, had dropped at least one mixtape. So I did channel a lot of my grief and my experiences through music, as many young boys do. And so when I went to university, didn't really have much of a plan other than I'm just going to university because there's no way I'm going back to my house. My parents won't even let me walk back into that door if university is not on the agenda. So I just went to uni because I knew that that's what I had to do. But no, I didn't know what. I picked my subject at university based on the show that I loved the most. So I went to university and studied criminology and sociology because I was obsessed with Criminal Minds and CSI. Yeah. So I went to university and studied criminology for that reason, and I loved my course. I loved it, and and I did well. And I guess that leads on to the fact that when I went to university, that was the first time I tasted any type of educational success. You could say in some ways I'd failed education up until that point. I left with basically not enough GCSEs to even class it as GCSEs. I failed my A levels. I probably passed maybe one, maximum two of them. I got through by clearing. So at this point, I'm coasting, borderline failing everything. So university, when I graduated with a 2-1 degree, that was the first time I tasted any kind of educational success. It was the proudest moment of my life up until that point because for my parents, knowing how important it was for them, their eldest is now a graduate. That is so important to them. Even though I'm like, this is just a piece of paper. This don't mean anything. Like that picture on the wall don't guarantee anything for the next 10 years. But having that picture of you holding up your degree, that is gold. Like everyone in Nigeria or their state, I know received that picture. So, and it's a big deal, fair enough. Like I said, my parents weren't educated formally. So for them, this is now like their dream come true in some ways. They came here for that moment. So fair enough. So that happened. But again, I didn't have a plan, didn't have a strategy, never really knew what I wanted to do. I had many aspirations, but nothing that I was, other than music, to be fair. I was very passionate about pursuing music. But being a footballer, being an actor, these are all things that I wanted to do, but didn't care enough to really pursue it. So I left uni and had no plan. Went back home again now. And the first few months, I'm jobless, of course, because there was no planning. I got some multi-sports coaching badges. I started working for a company and delivering sports clubs for schools around Tower Hamlets. So lunchtime clubs, after school clubs. And in one of those schools, I just built up a good rapport with the kids, really good relationship with them, really good relationship with the staff members. I'd be there. So I just said to the head teacher one day, I just said to her, listen, I don't mind staying after or coming early because I'm basically working 2 hours a day for the whole week, not even making enough to really support myself or even my girlfriend at the time. But for me, it's just I love being in the school. So I said, listen, if you need someone to come in, I'm happy to help in the classroom, help the children, whatever. I'm just talking as work experience for free. And she said, one of our male teachers or teaching assistants is leaving for paternity leave. He's just had a child. He supports a child with SEN. But if you go through an agency, you can sign up to them and then let them know that you've got a school and then we'll pay you for the 2 weeks. I said, oh, perfect. I wasn't thinking about that. The 2 weeks turned into 5 months. This was maybe January, February. I was there till July. And it was within that period of time that I realized, education is where I'm supposed to be. This is another skill or talent that I have. I love working with children, young people. So that happened. And then I started looking for teaching assistant jobs. They said, look no further. come here, but I started looking elsewhere. Kind of gave him a bit of an ultimatum. I said, like, I'm going to look other places now, and they make it work, don't they? When you give them an ultimatum. So they gave me a job there. So I did that for a short while, maybe like a year or 2 years. I'm not sure how long I was a TA for. And then very quickly, my head teacher realized that I had a skill in teaching. And so I would be covering lessons aside from me being a one-to-one support for children with like complex needs. I'd be covering lessons. I'd be doing this, doing that. I'd be leading football, organizing tournaments across the borough. But it was the teaching part that, of course, my head teacher noticed. So she said, Manny, I think you should really consider becoming a teacher. I said, impossible. I said, you see the time these miserable people leave school? I leave here at 3 o'clock with my football boots on. I'm not being a teacher. These lot are marking at 5. I couldn't even envisage it. And I'd never even thought about being a teacher anyway. I didn't care. I was like, no. So she kept saying it. She was like, Manny, come on, like, you can do it, And I'm like, I doubted myself, but I also thought, I don't care about this profession like that. But then I was at a real crossroads. Again, another pivotal moment. I had my wife now, but she was my girlfriend at the time. We'd been together for a few years now. We met at university. I'm a couple of years older. And there was that real challenge that I had as a man, which is, how are you going to provide? You're living at home with your mum, parents, things are nice, it's rosy. But, what you're on, how much money you're on, what you're doing is not sustainable. And I had a real different mindset then, I could admit. Like, I was happy being comfortable because I didn't have any major bills. I was making money and had savings. In hindsight, it's not proper savings, but I was like, I'm comfortable. And I actually remember my wife asking me at the time, like, what do you want to do? Something along those lines. What do you want to do? Or and I remember saying to her, like, you know what? I don't want to be rich. I don't want to have too much. I want to be content. I want to be comfortable. She must be thinking, damn, my dad's going to be so disappointed in me for choosing this guy. But I remember saying it, like, looking back, like, I think I just want to be content, comfortable. I had no real major aspirations. I can admit that, So I remember reflecting on my wife asking me this question and, talking to her, whatever. And I remember thinking to myself, damn, am I being a bit of a bum? Like, am I being lazy? And so I looked at this teaching thing again and I just thought to myself, the reality of it is I'm teaching lessons anyway, but I'm doing so as a teaching assistant on 18, 19,000. These teachers around me are earning 28 to 45,000 and we're doing the same thing pretty much. So the first challenge was, I know I need to make more money to do the things that I want to do to be able to provide for me and my partner, etc., etc. So the leap and the jump was more centered around the financial side of things and knowing that I wasn't really fulfilling my potential. So I did it reluctantly. Trained to be a teacher, terrible year, hated it. One of the worst years of my life. I went through physical issues. My insomnia developed to another level. I had chronic insomnia by the end of that year. Stress, I had a stomach ulcer, internal bleeding, all terrible year. Halfway through the year, I tried to quit. My lecturer, my uni facilitator, convinced me not to. She said, even if you don't ever become a teacher, do not quit halfway through the year. You got 4 or 5 months left, see it through, get your qualification, do whatever you want to do after that, but at least you have that qualification. So I listened to her and I kind of pushed through the end of the year, had a lot of support. Again, lack of confidence, lack of real purpose. I just didn't enjoy it. I just didn't enjoy it for different reasons. And so when it got to the end of the year, I said to myself that I'm not going to walk into a situation where I'm being miserable because I'm doing a job. I said, no way. So when my school offered me a position, I said no straight away. I said, I don't want to be a new teacher. Nothing to do with the school. I'll still work here. I don't want to be a brand new teacher. It's not for me. And so they were keen to keep me anyway. So they just said, okay, so what can we do for you? I said, fantastic. I said, I want to do football. I said, let me run my football tournaments, football coaching. I'll be more than happy to be a teaching assistant. I'll cover some lessons, whatever. They made the role for me. So I'm doing this role now, and starting September, I get to December, and I'm like, damn, I feel really unfulfilled. Like, when you're qualified and good enough to do something, but you're not. You're just there, just doing nonsense now. So it got to this.
Would you think it was fair though? Was it fair that kind of held you back initially?
Yeah, for sure. Fair was there, but yeah, it was fair. But but there was also a genuine understanding that I knew I did not want to work in a typical primary school because it was the environment, culture, the politics. I've never been interested in adult politics. It wasn't about the kids. I saw the adults that are meant to be teaching the children are all miserable and slanging each other off in the staff room, and there's fights here. And on top of that, it was hard. Like teachers, the job of a teacher is not easy. It is hard in itself. So there was also a level of fear / I say laziness, but because it wasn't ever my purpose, I couldn't ever see it as, why would I go and do that if that's not what I've said I'm going to be doing? As far as I'm concerned, I'm still meant to be...
The easy life is appealing.
Exactly, yeah. And remember, I'm still trying to be a rapper. So like, I'm there thinking, this isn't for me. Like, I'm like, this was meant to be paying for studio time. I don't want to be a teacher. So, but very quickly, I even organically, I didn't even think about it. I started moving slowly away from the music and became a lot more invested in my actual career as an educator. So then when it got to December and I was like, this is not working for me. I'm a bit bored, basically. I feel unfulfilled. So I knew I wasn't going to work in the mainstream primary school as a teacher. I didn't want to do it. It wasn't appealing to me. So I basically emailed every single pupil referral unit, special school, alternative provision that I could think of. I just emailed them. I said, I want to be a new teacher in your school from the next September. This is my passion. This is what I want to do. Would you accept this? And only one school got back to me. And that one school got back to me, and it was the head teacher of the primary school. And she said, oh, come for a visit. So I went to go visit, and I remember going there, and when I entered the school building, there was the secondary teacher of the school. Sorry, the secondary head teacher of the school, because it was a primary and secondary in one. He was restraining a child, restraining this secondary student. And the student was basically like spitting back at him, like saying, don't come here, he's a pedophile, spitting at him. So I'm like, what the hell is going on here? So I carry on walking, as you do, into the school. Like, okay, so let me start this day. I walked through the building and I just got a real good vibe, man. Classes were small, no bigger than 8 children in a classroom, 2, 3, sometimes 4 adults within the classroom supporting. I just saw good lessons being taught. I saw real compassionate teachers teaching lessons. I got a good vibe. I spent half a day there and I loved it. So at the end of the day, the head teacher said to me, unofficially. No, she was like, oh, we loved having you in the building. Everyone's talking about you. How did you feel? I said, oh, it was great. I loved it. She said, if we unofficially offered you a role there, would you take it? And I said, if you unofficially offered me a role, I would unofficially accept the role. Like, what are you saying here? So we basically were able to sort something out with my current school. And long story short, June 2016, a number of weeks later, we were able to arrange for me to start at that school a term before they were meant to break up, so that they could give me a whole 6 weeks, 7 weeks to get used to the class that I would be taking up in September, which was a fantastic experience because it gave me a chance to get to know the school, the system, and get to know the class before I even get to teach them the following year. So that was great. And then 2016, June that year, I became the first newly qualified teacher that the school had ever appointed in 25 years. And the reason why that's significant is because it was a special school. It was a special school for children with socio-emotional and mental health concerns. So their profile typically of those children many of them would have been children who had not been in formal education for a long period of time or who had been excluded. Many of them would have experienced some form of physical abuse, hence why many of them were also in care. So we had a high amount of children that were in care in the foster system. And so those common denominators obviously came with very complex, challenging behavior. So I guess it wasn't the kind of move you would make typically as a teacher trying to teach for the first time in a school. But for me, because I knew that's where my skill was meant to be, because I knew my skill set, because I knew where I wanted to teach, the type of children I wanted to support, what school should look like, everything made sense. On the outside, it was like, why would you do that? Even my parents were like, Sean, why are you like, what? The children are spitting at you. Like, what? Like,
yeah, it's like
the child. And I'm like, yeah, mom. Like, but listen, I get it though. Like, remember I got excluded from school,
you said you walked into a school, one man is spitting at you, and you fed a source of peace. I'm like, those two things do not make sense.
Like, I said, got here. Like, no problem. Like, so my parents are panicking. Yeah, my parents are there panicking, and they're like, Sean, like, we're really worried. Like, why are you here? Like, so it got to the point where I had to start telling them about the stories I had of school because they were I'm there talking about a fascinating story. Like, listen, mum, won't believe what happened today. Like, this happened and whatever and blah, blah, blah. And they're like, Sean, are you sure this is the kind of place you need to be? I'm really worried. Like, are you sure? What if a child's going to come into school and bring a gun on? You know how they exaggerate everything, So I stopped telling them some of my funny stories. My wife appreciated them. But yeah, long story short, I was there for 5 years. In that time, I grew. I grew incredibly quick. I became a Senko within 3 years. I did a leadership course in my NQT year. On that leadership course, I saw for the very first time Black head teachers, and that was another significant moment because it made me realize that Black head teachers existed, and for once I saw that actually being something achievable. So that was quite pivotal, and I did that in my first year of teaching. I went on a leadership course, and I remember writing out a 5-year strategy plan off the back of that leadership course, mapping out my route as to how I was going to become an SLT member after 5 years. And lo and behold, it happened, because every course, every action, every conversation, it was all led to that one goal. And that's why I say purpose is important, because before that moment, I had never done any type of planning or had anyone sit with me and spoke to me about the power of planning and purpose, because they both work hand in hand. If you have purpose, that's great. You think you know what you're meant to do, you know your destiny. What are you going to do to get there? And I never had that explicit conversation ever. And so that leadership course, they asked, what do you want to do? Write it down. What are you going to do to get there? How, why, when? And I've still got that notepad today, because it's like I look back at it and I'm like, but that is the template, the formula for anything that I want to do of success. And because I knew my why I wanted to do it, and I had mapped out my how, and I knew when I wanted to do it by roughly, when it came to making decisions, I knew, because I knew exactly what I was doing. So in my first year as a NQT, I did that course, like I said. But the second year, I went to my school and I said, listen, there's this master's program or postgraduate program. It's to become a Senko. It's going to cost a couple of £1,000. I would like to do that course. Would you sponsor me? They're looking at me like, why would you want to do this? Because the course that I'm talking about, there's not a position for that course in my school. So it wouldn't really serve the school per se. It would do in terms of you got a highly experienced person in that area, send coordination. But in a special school, it's not really a requirement, because you could say all of us in some ways send specialists or send teachers, so we all fill in that way. Whereas in a mainstream school, it's usually one person that does that. But I knew that my route to get into senior leadership was going to be through the Senko route, because as a senior leader, typically you would have an area of expertise. And for me, it was going to be send behavior. So I did that. They paid for it, yeah, which is why, not favor. Favor is one thing, but I was also incredibly good at my job. So, when one of the best teachers in your school says, I want this because it's going to make me a better teacher and it's going to help you in the short term, they're going to give it to you. So they did that. Other people are like, why would you do that? There's no Senko in this school. We don't have one. I said, don't worry about me. Let me just do my Senko course.
But I think that's something that I kind of picked up in your story as well, though, is the willingness to ask. Like, even when they offered you that job earlier on, you're like, nah, I don't want to do that. Okay, what do? So there's a willingness from your part to be like, this is what I want. Is this going to happen? Are you going to make this happen? Are you going to pay for me? Are you going to sponsor me? A lot of times people think about stuff in their head and they're like, oh, they're going to say no, so we don't ask. You repeatedly ask, and that's been really, really key for some of what you're sharing, which I think it's a pivotal point as well.
Yeah, you're right. I haven't always thought about it in that way, but I think when I've got good relationships with people that I work with, it also comes naturally as well, because I'm not even asking for like the sake of having a plan or a scheme. It's like, oh, there's this thing I'm interested in, but can I do it? And when you've got favor, or you've got good relationships with people, and you're credible enough for it, people will grant you that. That's just the way of the world anyway. But like you said, you don't get if you don't ask. So I asked and they said yes. And I was like, fantastic. So they paid for me to do the Senko program while I'm teaching, whilst they know also that there's no Senko in the school or whatever. So I did that. And the next year, I didn't use that Senko qualification, of course, because they didn't have a Senko. But now that I had the qualification, I started looking for jobs where they needed a Senko. So my career mapping was now in full effect. I got the qualification I needed. Now the next step was to fulfill the role as a Senko. The next step after that would be to then apply for a senior leadership position where the responsibility was Senko, because you have assistant head roles where the responsibility is a Senko. Yeah. So I did the next year. Obviously, I just qualified as a Senko. That was that. And at the end of that academic year, I started applying for Senko positions. And I'm always transparent with my bosses. So I told them, I said, I'm basically going to be leaving, or I'm going to be leaving if I get a job role. Nothing to do with the school. I love it here. It's amazing. Genuinely was. But I'm now thinking about my progression. I'm capped here. I need to do this role. So I went for a job interview, and it was a school in Woolwich. And basically, the position was I'd be Senko across two schools. I'm looking for a Senko role across one. Senko role across two schools, primary and a secondary. They're not even attached. One is like 2 miles away from the other. And I'd have oversight over there. Great like opportunity from a personal development point of view. Obviously, I would be seen as a senior leader. I had the interviews. The only interview I had, got the job. Really, really good opportunity. I was really excited. And I came back to my school with a heavy heart, and I said to them, listen, they wished me well anyway, but I said to them, I got the job. I'm ready to go. And that same year, we were due to have an executive head teacher come in, a new one. And so he got wind of the fact I was trying to leave. And so he approached my boss at the time and said, is there anything we can do to keep Manny? Like, how are we going to keep this guy? Like, and obviously they're not, and they said to him, like, he's going because there's a new opportunity, a better, it's about his career. You know how Manny is. He's not gonna just stay still if he's not progressing or whatever. So he just randomly walked into a meeting while I'm talking with my boss one day. I was like, Manny, this is a bit out of context, but I need to speak to you. I said, all right then. And he basically just said to me, like, what can we do to keep you? I said, listen, it's nothing about money. They offered me more money I said, it's not about that. Like, I'm going because I need that experience with the qualification I have to fulfill it. There's a plan behind this. And long story short, they basically offered to create the Senko role in the school. We didn't have one. And so they created that Senko role. And at the time, I asked for a few things. I asked for some assurances that there would be some real, clarity as to what my role looked like here. It wasn't just a title that I got, but without me actually fulfilling those duties, because my actual experience of doing the role was really important. And, they gave the guarantees and all that stuff. Unfortunately, things didn't work out how I wanted it to in terms of them fulfilling their end of the deal. I don't think it was particularly malicious. I think it was more so where they created a role for the sake of keeping someone. They didn't necessarily have they didn't have a plan or a purpose for the role. So they didn't know how. The
system wasn't set up.
It wasn't set up for it. So I'm now being unfulfilled in different ways now, and things being ad hoc or not really getting the time to do the things that are necessary. So it was what it was. I don't really hold any particular grudges around that. I still think, God's hand and everything, it was all on it, because if not for that, when my wife became pregnant shortly after that, if I wasn't there, I would have been traveling somewhere that would have been quite far, and I wouldn't have had the flexibility to be there for my wife. I wouldn't have had the favor of my workplace to give me the time off that I needed. All of those little soft factors that you forget that play a part in your actual work experience. So although from a career point of view, it felt very unfulfilling, I saw the positives in that. Actually, I was still close to home. There was other things. I was where I wanted to be, blah, blah, blah. So that was that. But very quickly, I knew though that I couldn't stay there in this kind of capacity in this way. So I started looking for a job. But at this point now, I'm still following my map. So I'm looking for assistant head roles. I didn't want to do it in my school, because I knew that actually now that I've been in a special school for 5 years, I needed to now increase my knowledge and my experience outside of special education for me to be truly well-rounded. And mainstream, that word again, it was really daunting to me. I didn't want to go back. Remember, I've ran away from mainstream education because I didn't like how it was set up. But I knew I had to go back into it, because there was a lot of stuff like my pedagogy, understanding of curriculum, teaching and learning. There was a lot of things that I learned in a special school, but there was a lot of things that I knew I wasn't also getting, and I could only get it going back into a mainstream setup again. So I started applying for jobs, and then it got to a point where I said to myself, at this point, I've started working at the Reach Out Project. I'm a director there now. And I started saying to myself, what do I really want to do? And I convinced myself that actually I didn't really think I wanted to be in education in this way anymore. I felt like at the time I was ready to kind of go real left and just do maybe my charity full time. I was doing a lot of speaking at the time, writing a lot of blogs. So lots of opportunities were coming outside of work. And so I just thought to myself, no, maybe I want to take a different approach from education. So funny enough, I applied for one job. It was the last job I applied for. But I'd already said I'm not applying for any more jobs after this job because I'm now just going to pursue how can I do my charity project full time, make a salary from it, and then just kind of work my way around that. And that last job that I applied for is the one job that I got an interview for, and I did the interview, my first ever senior leadership interview, and guess what happened? I got the job.
Got the
So
role.
now I'm like, so now I'm like, God, what's going on now, man? Like, because I said to my directors, I'm like, listen, guys, I'm leaving. Like, I'm leaving education, guys. You know, like that whole, like, I'm leaving. Like, what we doing now? Let's plan. And then I'm like calling them like, wow, guys, you won't believe it. Yeah, I got the assistant head role, man. Yeah, I guess I'm starting in September now. It was massive because it was massive. Like, it was a big deal. It's an assistant head teacher role. In context of my career, I had only actually been a full-time teacher for maybe 5-6 years. So I think even that in itself kind of showed how well my career had progressed, I guess. And obviously again it came back to the whole making my parents proud again. I really felt that was quite a symbolic moment as well. My parents just being incredibly proud. I fought battles with my dad a lot throughout my teaching career because of education, because he did not see it as a profession that was well respected. He didn't approve of me being a teacher when I first started, the profession. And I had to really convince him a number of times that, Dad, like, I know your perspective of this is how you've seen it in Nigeria, how you see people talk about it in politics. He kept saying, son, you're bigger than this. And I used to find that very offensive because it's like, bigger than what? Like, teaching is a great job. It's the best profession in the world. In hindsight, I can kind of understand where he was getting at and what he was thinking, but I still protected my views on the profession in that this is a great job, Dad. And I'm going to prove to you that I can get to the pinnacle of this. And if it's a financial thing, let me tell you that there's CEOs of multi-academy trusts that are on 250,000, 300,000 a year. So from that point, even though that's not where my mind was at per se, but I was trying to prove to him that the way you talk about this, if it's about money, I can bank on myself to be that person one day.
There's levels.
If that's, yeah. So I think me becoming an assistant head teacher for my family, but more so for my dad, was like a real, okay, I'm proud of you, son, Because up until that point, there's no achievement in education where he'd be like, I'm proud of you, son. You became phase leader or Senko. You don't care about any of that. But I think that title for him was quite a big deal. But I think outside of my family and outside of my own personal kind of like feeling of like, yeah, you done it. You done sick, actually. From where you started off in education, for how long you've been in education for, you've done sick. But I think one of the things that I always think about, and a lot of people don't think that we think about it, is I'm also very conscious that within education, Black teachers make up a very small percentage, as in a couple of percent. Yeah.
You're like unicorns.
Unicorns. Yeah? A couple of percent, In the profession, we make up a small amount as just Black educators. But then if you talk about Black senior leaders, we're like 2% of the whole country. So you could go South London and see a couple of them in a meeting, but just know you're seeing the bulk of the Black senior leaders in one place. Yeah, that are meant to represent the country. So I knew, and it was conscious in my mind, that actually this was a big deal for the aesthetics of things as well. It was a big deal for the children that I'm about to now go and support. It's a big deal for the staff that I'm about to go and basically be leading. It was a big deal for my community, people that had been excluded like myself. I just saw that actually there was so much power in representation. And it wasn't really a pressure that weighed me down. It made me feel proud. It was like, yeah, because when people saw me or still speak to me and say, oh, so what do? You always hear the sense of shock or surprise. Sometimes it's because I look young. Sometimes I know it's because, oh, wait, you're a Black guy. You're a Black man. You're a Black man that sounds like you. You're a Black man from East Ham. All of those things for some people is like you said, you're a unicorn. You do not see it. I don't know how far I'd have to go down the road before you see a similar situation. So I was very, very aware and conscious of that. So I took on the role with pride and I was excited, more so for the opportunity to learn. And I've been in that position for about a year now, just over a year. It's been challenging for those same reasons, being a young Black man who is leading other people, being a young Black man who is working with other people, and then also the actual intricacies of being a leader in itself. I've learned so much about leadership, the good and the bad. I had my own views of what leadership was before I even got into leadership. And now I look back and be like, boy, keep quiet. Like, because leadership has so much more to do. So yeah, so it's been good. It's been an interesting year for me.
How do you define leadership?
For me, leadership is leading by example and leading people to an end goal unapologetically. And I'll break it down. So the reason why I say leading by example is because it's almost impossible for you to lead on anything, whether it's in IT, whether it's as a school leader, if you're not actually, if you do not believe or do not actually do or represent that very thing. So I'll give you an example. As an assistant head teacher, I see myself, I have to be one of the best teachers in that school. So I'm leading by example. I think it's almost a bit of an oxymoron that you could call yourself a head teacher and not have a relative standard of great, amazing teaching capabilities. So when I say leading by example, I mean it from a very practical point of view. But then when I say being unapologetic in your leadership, what I mean by that is one thing I've learned is you have a vision, and not everybody, no one, 90% of people don't ever see your vision or see things how you see it. I think leadership is convincing people that your way of doing things or what your vision is worth pursuing and getting them there. That for me is leadership, because you can't be everyone's friend. Unfortunately, I've learned that lesson. You could be nice to people, you can't be everyone's friend. Yeah, you can't always be nice about things. Yeah, so all those little soft factors that I thought leadership was about how you speak to people, whatever, they all matter. But ultimately, it's having a vision and getting people to come along on that journey with you. And so the reason why I say you have to be unapologetic is you will get people even within your own camp that would be like, I don't think that makes sense. That doesn't work. And you're like, I'm not really asking. We're going to do it. Because the respect you get is usually when people see that your vision or your plans or your purpose was right. And that's where the respect comes. And the respect comes not just from you being right, but from people being like, oh, this guy sees something we don't see, but he also knows how to get there or how to get people to get what it is that he wants. So when I define leadership, I really do look at it as just an opportunity to lead people to what you see as the promised land and being able to do so successfully. And then there's many things that come within that, employing people, sacking people, treating people with kindness, treating people with, harshness, empowering people. So many aspects of leadership that I've learned in the last year that make up a good leader. But I don't ever take for granted that I also think being authentic and having integrity for me are also massive of my specific leadership style. But then leadership style is a different thing altogether. You know that obviously as an executive coach. So I have my vision of what leadership is, but I also have a style, and I appreciate that other people have different styles. And if you ask people about what my style is, I'm assuming they will tell you that I am compassionate, empathetic, integrity, communication, all of those things. I don't necessarily think they are what makes a great leader. They're just my leadership style. But if you look at the makeup of my team, we all have different ingredients to bring to the table. And so we've got some that are a lot more pragmatic, very objective. They call you into the office, it's bam, 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 bam. But they know what they're talking about. And although they're not kind and friendly, like Emmanuel is, but you still need that. I need that, because you can't always be the good cop. You need the bad cop. You need the person that like everyone knows. When you go to her, just know, don't even waste your time talking about your life story. She doesn't care, because she just wants to know, did you do your job today? And you need that. Whereas with me, you come and sit in my office and it's an open door policy. I've got a million things to do. You walk into my office, I'm like, so how can I help you today? I'm scratching my head like, how am I going to do this work? But let me listen to what this person is saying. But you need that. So yeah. So leadership for me is very important, and it has many different aspects to it, and there's many different styles that you can take.
Listening to your story has been intriguing in so many ways, and seeing your growth from where you started to experiences you've had to school to navigating tragedy to getting to where you got to right now, for me is it just goes to show how much strength and courage that we all have, but also how I love life experiences sometimes can really just help us to see things completely differently and reshape and focus of if we so choose to. Because there's also another school of thought that say you could have gone down a completely different path with what happened to you, but you actually chose to use it and to help you to kind of refocus and to kind of build that legacy. And like I said, you doing what you're doing as a black assistant head is such a rarity. But not only that, but going there with a vision of how you were at school and knowing the things that went right, you create a different path, a different learning experience for kids. For me, it's so crucial. But there's one part of the story that I'm very curious about as we wrap up. Your girlfriend, now your wife, has been with you all the way throughout, from you being an aspiring rapper to everything that you're doing right now. How was that journey navigating your relationship and going through the different things that you've gone through with a partner right next to you? Because that's another element that adds how we approach life.
Yeah, my wife, she's incredible. The reason why I say my wife is incredible is because she's taught me a lot about life. And one of the things she's taught me is that people change. And if you give people enough grace and patience and time and investment, there is something really, really good on the other side of that. And the reason why I say that is because she met me as a 20-year-old. I think I was 20, 19, 20. I had no aspiration, particularly. I had no plan or purpose. I didn't know what I was going to do. I thought I was going to be a rapper, but other than that, like, I had no plan or purpose. I had no money to offer her or to give her. I was borderline miserable as a 19, 20-year-old. And I even had very skewed views. One of the first conversations I had with her is, I'm never getting married, by the way. We weren't even courting. We knew each other as like friends. But I said to her, oh yeah, yeah. Nah, I'm never getting married. Like, nah. And she always reflects back on that. She said, like, I remember you saying that. Like,
What kind of bars that?
She said, I thought you were so weird. And it wasn't bars because we weren't talking like that. Like we were introduced as like a friendship group, blah blah blah. So this was me just talking loosely, but she always remembers that, and she always says, like, do you remember when you said you would never get married? Like, I used to think you were so weird. Like, what's this guy problem? But I meant it, and I say all of that to say this: that like she met me when I was at a particular point in my life, a young boy with nothing to really offer, but she clearly saw my potential because she was with me at the time. And she stuck with me when I didn't even know how I was going to pay for a train to go and see her in university, because I was only working 2 hours a day after I had left university. She stuck with me when I was going through my depression, and I had at least one suicide attempt that she was present for to be able to get me through. She stuck with me when, me being a typical young man who didn't really see what being a man looked like, in some ways you could say was about to waste her time. And she had to remind me, what do you want to do with your life and what do you want to do with us? Because I'm not about to have my time wasted. And I had to really dig deep and think to myself, well, let me think about what I want to do with my life. And one of those questions was, do I want to spend the rest of that time with you? And she was there in that process to be able to remind me, like, I'm not the kind of girl where you just don't really think about what you're going to do next. We're just coasting. I'm letting you know I've got my own plans. And she saw me through that process, and she saw me go from a single guy to being married and navigating what it's like to be a husband, which hasn't been easy because I've been married for 4 years and we were together 8 years before that. And I wasn't the same person I was when I was 20 to when I was 28, and I got married to her. And then you realize that living with someone has its own complexities and difficulties. So I go a real long way to basically describing someone who I think has been the most important person in this journey, other than God himself, because she's been a lifelong friend, and I've needed that friend. In many of my darkest moments, she was the only person I had. She saw me when I had nothing, and she saw me when I had something. She saw me when I financially struggled. She saw me when I had money. No matter good or bad, low or whatever it is, she's always been there to stick with me. She's shown me what loyalty looks like. And so I think for me, and then she's also blessed me with my daughter, which has been one of the proudest moments of my life. My daughter's 2 years old now. And so I'm always forever grateful that I just have a woman that I can trust, but also a woman that I can trust with my daughter's life. God forbid if anything happened to me. And so I think in many ways, she's been there for me, but I think I can kind of easily say I don't think I would be where I'm at or be who I am today without my wife in my life, because it would have been physically impossible. On my worst days when I'm sick, when I'm like, yeah, I'm an assistant head teacher, but I don't think I can go in tomorrow. because I'm physically struggling. And she's the person that has to say to me sometimes, "You got to go in, man. Just do it." She's that push, On my darkest days, my darkest moments, she's there. On my best days, she's there. She's just there. And so I think for me, it's really important to kind of stress that, like, no man is an island, and so whether you're married or whether you have someone or not, like, there's no way I would have achieved or done anything I've done without the support of my wife. But then also my mum's a massive factor in all of this as well. Key advocates for me in every one of my schools or institutions, key adults. Yeah, having other people there to support you on your journey is very, very important. And my wife, single-handedly, or undoubtedly, should I say, is probably the most important person in that journey. Because again, like I said, she saw me when I had nothing. So all that I achieve now, she can genuinely say, I've seen him grow, develop, become what he is. And hopefully I can make her proud, and everything I say I want to do and achieve, by the time I go and leave this earth, she can be like, well, actually, if you saw what he was doing at 10, 11, 12 at night to get there, that's someone that really cares about giving a better life to his family, for his children, for himself. She knows more than anybody else, like, what it is that I've gone through, what I do. So yeah, so that's my appreciation post for my partner. But definitely without her, none of this is possible. Bar God, none of this is possible for sure. Yeah. So
Oh, well, it's always amazing to see people and to really understand people. And I need to give a special shout out to Shawnee. Actually, Shawnee's the one that connected both of us together. And Shawnee's
yes,
like, you need to have a conversation. She's
big up
like, you need to
Shani.
have a conversation with Emmanuel. And she's like, I ain't gonna say nothing else. You just need to have a conversation with Emmanuel. And she was so on point. Like so much stuff that even when you would like talk today, I'm like, it's just bringing back so many memories. So thank you for just being open, being vulnerable, being sharing, and thank you also for being very inspirational. Like you said, when you were able to go to the spaces and places where you saw the first black head teachers, now people can look at you as there are people like Manny in that space as someone who wrote down their purpose and they've achieved the things that they wanted to achieve and then some. So you are being inspiration to the next generation coming up. You are leaving that legacy in so many areas, not just in school, but like I said, the writing, the public speaking, the work you're doing, Reach Out Project, all of those kind of different areas. You're making a massive impact to a lot of youngers coming up. So you, sir, are appreciated for all you do. So thank you very much for that.
No worries, man. Thank you for having me. And like you said, big up Shani every time, because she did facilitate and make this happen. But yeah, no, it's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure.
This is Everyday Leadership. See you next week.